Hello, everyone, and welcome to Casa Navarro's latest webinar entitled The Glorious History of San Pedro Creek. My name is Kristen Rodriguez, and I am the Assistant Site Manager here at Casa Navarro State Historic Site. Casa Navarro is the home site of Jose Antonio Navarro. He is best known for being one of two Tejano signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence, and his home site is located here in downtown San Antonio. I would like to introduce Julian, sorry. I got it right earlier and now I done messed it up because I'm thinking about it too much. I'm sorry. Would you like to introduce yourself then, Julian?
Yes, ma'am. So I am Julian Navarrete with the San Antonio River Authority. I am the part-time public affairs coordinator, and you'll get to know more about me once we start our presentation. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Kristen?
No, I just want to thank you for joining us today. And if you'd like to go ahead and get started, one thing though, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat feature and then we can get to them once he's completed his presentation. But if you'd like to, go right ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to start off by thanking y'all at Casa Navarro for inviting me to speak about the San Pedro Creek. And so we'll learn about how the San Pedro Creek has influenced the area that it surrounded, uh, that it trickles into. And so Casa Navarro is a very big part of that. We're lucky to have that site there. And I'm happy that our organizations are working with each other to promote our different causes. And so it's really easy if you come down to San Antonio and you're on the creek, take a visit to Casa Navarro and vice versa. So we'll start. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am the part-time public affairs coordinator with the San Antonio River Authority, and I am a San Antonio native, born and raised in downtown. I have plenty of family history on the creek. It's where a lot of people, that's where my parents went to school, on the creek at Fox Tech, if you're familiar with the area. It's where I went to high school. It's where everyone that I know works. And so what you can imagine my excitement whenever I found out that the San Pedro Creek was going to be turned into this beautiful, gorgeous linear park. And it also happens to have a whole bunch of public art. And I actually started at the River Authority as the public art intern. And so I'm very well versed in the public art of the public art aspect of the creek. And so I'm really excited to share that with y'all during this presentation. So what is the San Pedro Creek? Well, it is a waterway that runs parallel to the San Antonio River. It is a tributary of the San Antonio River, and they meet at Confluence Park, which is near Mission Concepcion in the southern part of San Antonio. And so there are 5 goals with this project being the culture park, and that is flood control, water quality, economic development, cultural linkages, and community engagement. And so we'll go more into that, but first I wanted to start off with more of the history of people being along the creek, right? So we have very many different parts of the creek, and I'm really happy of the way that the creek is laid out because I feel like it's a very great timeline. It works back and forth, and so the more you travel from north to south, it acts like this is the older part, this is the newer parts. And so I'm really excited to expand more on that as we get further into our presentation. And so in this presentation, I will be utilizing the 5-panel mural entitled La Gloriosa Historia de San Pedro Creek on My Mind, a story in 5 episodes, which we affectionately call the 5-panel mural here at the River Authority. And so this contains the human history of San Pedro Creek and splits it into 5 different segments. And so we'll have foundation, collaboration and confrontation, separation, inundation and constriction, and restoration. And so all of these will kind of fall into line, and which is why I've used these, because they're very representative of the San Pedro Creek and how we've utilized it over time. And I really wanted to get that point across. It's also an amazing piece of public art, and with the San Pedro Creek being so heavily featured with a whole bunch of different murals and tile works, I think that it's very important that I kind of utilize our tools, and it also makes it easier as we transition for you to get a better overview of how things have changed. So we'll begin with foundation. So this represents the time period of the San Pedro Creek for 10 to 12,000 years ago. There is archaeological evidence of people inhabiting the area, particularly around the San Pedro Springs Park. And so that is just north of where our San Pedro Creek Culture Park begins. And so particularly the Payaya people, which are labeled oftentimes as the founding members of San Antonio, which they called it Yanaguana, which is thought to mean fresh waters. But in Fundación, you know, going back these thousands of years, the San Pedro Creek has always been a constant. It has always drawn people in. There has been large game such as bison and deer and antelope, and then as well as abundant shellfish. And furthermore, with the plant life, there was nuts and fruits and berries and root vegetables that all grew along the creek. So you can imagine kind of this oasis in a semi-arid environment. And this is reflected in this panel. So we have a lot of naturalistic plants and depicting the fauna and plant life of the creek. And so moving forward, we get into how people have utilized the creek and what that means. So this is kind of the foundation of San Antonio prior to European colonization and exploration. One last look, and then you'll also notice that she is holding a structure in between her hands. And so that is what we call a jacal or jacales, which is a structure that is pretty common throughout the Southwest and Northern Mexico. And if you're interested, if you ever get the chance to come down and visit Casa Navarro, they do have examples of that shown in their displays. And so moving on to confrontation and collaboration. So confrontation with the arrival of European explorers and missionaries and friars, there is a little bit of who are you? Where are you from? You know, you're kind of imposing some stuff on me. But moving forward, they also turned into collaborators. So not only building the mission, but building San Antonio in general. And so San Antonio, the city of San Antonio and the county of Bexar as government institutions were founded along the San Pedro Creek. So the first mission San Antonio de Valero, which is the official name for the Alamo. So the original Alamo sites are said to be along the San Pedro Creek, and actually remnants of the first presidio can be seen at the Spanish Governor's Palace, which is another great historical society and organization that happens to be there on the creek. And so we're really lucky to have all of these organizations. But so if you want to see some of the remnants of the first presidio, that's there on the creek as well. And so confrontation, again, talking about the different identities within the large group of Native Americans or indigenous people. So several different groups did call this area or lay claim to this area. So as I mentioned before, the Payaya are usually what we think of first when we talk about indigenous people in San Antonio, but also the Apache, the Lipan Apache, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, the Comanche came down as well. And so there's different groups. And so all of these different groups had different experiences with Europeans, particularly the Spanish. And so a lot of them, there's a lot of documentation, especially with Mission San Jose, where a lot of indigenous people willingly converted to Catholicism, but then there's forced conversion. And so different people groups have different experiences with the Spanish. And so I really wanted to emphasize that indigenous people are not a monolith. And so whenever we talk about, you know, colonization in the US and in Texas, we really do want to get our different aspects. And so that's something that we're working on currently at the River Authority. And so I'm looking forward to getting more information on that. But as far as indigeneity in San Antonio and its relationship to the San Pedro Creek, we do want to be respectful of people and also just acknowledge the different types of people groups that have laid claim to San Antonio. And so moving forward, this is also a site of early San Antonio, Main Plaza. So Main Plaza lies in between the San Antonio River and the San Pedro Creek. And that area is where San Antonio started. And we'll get into why right now. So irrigation is a really big part of the San Pedro Creek's contribution to the growth of San Antonio. So in 1719, Governor Alarcón ordered the townspeople to construct acequias, right? To work together. And also this goes back to our collaboration part, the indigenous and the Spanish coming together to create San Antonio. And so the early acequias ran from the San Pedro Creek to the San Antonio River, and they irrigated about 300 acres. And water was also used in construction. Casa Navarro has several adobe structures, and so that was a large piece, water and sand and thatch that comes together to make those adobe bricks. But also this is the beginning of our manipulation of our waterways. So constructing these irrigation canals really opens up a portal of flood control and how we begin to mediate this and why the San Antonio River Authority exists. So this is again the jacal wall that you can see at Casa Navarro. We also have the molds that you can, which I believe in a couple of days, there will be an event. Kristen?
Yes. Late at the end of this month, July 29th, we will be having Architecture Day here at Casa Navarro, and we will be demonstrating, and kids and families can also participate in creating adobe bricks, working on the jacal wall, and just talking more about the construction and the methods that were used to create the buildings here at Casa Navarro. So please come out to that. It'll be a program we're offering from 10 to 1, free with the price of admission. Thanks.
And so water was incredibly important. Water is life. And so to have these crops irrigated, for example, there at Casa Navarro, they do still have plantings of corn. And so having these crops be irrigated and having people fed was key to the growth of San Antonio and the growth of the neighborhood. So Laderito, which is the neighborhood where Casa Navarro resides, was made because of the San Pedro Creek and irrigation. So again, one last look at confrontation and collaboration. Note the weaponry and the missions in the background. And then I believe that the woman in the center is a Canary Islander, and she's holding the Spanish governor's palace.
And you can even see some corn in there too. So.
Yeah. Awesome. And then we're moving in. So as we progress into the beginning of the 20th century, late 18th or late 19th century, the San Pedro Creek unfortunately becomes a dividing line between East and West. And on the western side, which is depicted on the left, we have a Mexican-American woman with a shotgun house. And so the west side of San Antonio is historically the Mexican side of town, and it was designated as the Mexican side of town. And so in the background, we can see emblems of that time period and some of the cultural significance, such as the Virgen de Guadalupe, La Jaula, which means the jail, which for many decades was Casa Navarro's neighbor, unfortunately. And also the Union stockyards, as well as the Lackland Air Force Base, which is depicted by the large plane in the bottom right corner. And so this kind of depicts the lower class, lower class living, which came with being Mexican American in this time period, as well as El Mercado, which you can see on the left of her bun. So Market Square, historic Market Square, was a legitimate full market before it became a tourist destination. But unfortunately, in the construction of the highway system, it was cut off from the community that it served. And so there's a lot of things that play into San Pedro Creek and how it relates to kind of this division between East and West. And then again, in the eastern side of downtown, this is where the commercial centers were. This is where the banks were. This is where City Hall and the Bexar County Courthouse were. And this is also where the museums and theater districts are. So a lot of commerce. And then the house that she holds is actually something that you might see in Hemisphere or in King William if you ever come down and visit. And so whenever you compare and contrast, I think that the artist, Kathy Sosa, really put it poetically. And she said that these are two sisters who lived different lives. And so they're really related and they're conjoined together by the creek. And so I love how this story is being told in this mural. And also something that I wanted to mention was on the left, you can see her pecan shell earrings, which are, ingenuity, her coming out and trying to make the most of what little resources she has. And so I love that little touch. Kristen, were you going to add something?
No, I just think that's really cool. I would have never realized there were pecans, but that speaks to the pecan sheller strikes and, that part of our history. Really cool stuff.
And so moving forward, we really want to amend this, and I'll go much deeper into that. But there are some social, and then right now I'll get into the ecological errors that happened with the San Pedro Creek. And so in today's society, we really want to remediate those errors. And then here are some images of the former county jail that was right next to Casa Navarro. Luckily, it isn't there anymore. It is now going to be part of UTSA. And so it's just really interesting to think of the lives that the land that is adjacent to the San Pedro Creek have lived. It's really unfortunate in some cases, but it tells really interesting stories. And so we move into inundation. So this is really the beginning of the 20th century. And so inundation and constriction. So with the urban pressures of San Antonio, growing really rapidly, this is whenever it became a large metropolitan area, a big powerhouse in terms of like modern day economy. So inundation, the people began building in the floodplain, which is not the best idea, to put it lightly. So frequently flooding was an issue, but that led engineers to heavily reconstruct the creek. So they stripped it of its natural creek bed and they lined it with concrete in an effort to just move water out of downtown as fast as possible. They also straightened the channel, so there wasn't really anywhere for the creek to meander. And so constricting the creek at the time was this amazing engineering marvel, but as we reflect, we see that that wasn't actually the best thing to do. And I'll go more into that as to why later in the presentation. But referring to inundation as well also refers to the flood of people that came into San Antonio. So in the far left of the triad of people that we have depicted in this mural, we have a lady who is holding La Trinidad, which is the first church in San Antonio to offer bilingual services. And then on the right, there is a blonde woman who holds San Fernando Cathedral, which is probably the most well-known cathedral here in San Antonio. It's very beautiful and very historic. But also there in the center, we have the St. James African Methodist Episcopal Church. So the church we refer to sometimes as the AME site, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, St. James AME, or simply the Archaeological Site. So in February of 2020, foundations were uncovered. So originally this was a parking lot and we didn't really know that it was there. So to have this archaeological discovery was quite shocking. And so through archival research, we're able to find that in 1871, formerly enslaved people began using a portion of what was the Klemke Menger Soapworks factory for religious services. Now, the Klemke Menger Soapworks originally started operations at the archaeological site and then moved further north along the creek. So if you come down and visit the creek, you can also see the current soapworks, which is now one of the oldest antebellum architectures or examples of industrial architecture here in San Antonio. So that's another historic site that you can see along the creek. But coming back to this, in 1873, the congregation purchased the property, and then in 1875, the floor plan was expanded. So it's really interesting to see that different cultures were coming into San Antonio. And as I spoke to now the former pastor, he said it very interestingly, and I love to share it with other people. He said that in San Antonio, there's a large Hispanic population, large German influence, large Irish influence, and you can see those people depicted in the architecture of downtown. But to see this site was incredibly impactful for him because it proved that the Black population in San Antonio and in Texas has been here, and it has been contributing, and they have been active in the community. And the St. James AME Church is still present in San Antonio. It is still an active church in the inner west side. And so we're happy to know that that church is still alive, and the relationship between us and that site has only grown. And so we're really excited to showcase this. At the moment, it is in the process of being on the National Register of Historic Places. So hopefully soon that is something that we can also say that there's a nationally registered historic place along the creek as well, which there are several Texas, but to have something of that caliber just draws more people in. And so again, inundation. Now, once we move into flood control, so flooding along the creek persisted. It wasn't something that just went away because the creek was channelized. It was really unfortunate to see that actually the engineering of it contributed to the crest of the creek. So that is the height of the creek as well as the velocity of the water as it travels increased. So this had horrendous effects downstream. And so though it saved parts of downtown, it really did cause other problems more downstream. And so in the 90s, a flood tunnel was constructed. And so similarly to the San Antonio River, if you're not aware, that one also has a flood tunnel. So a flood tunnel was constructed in the 90s at the San Pedro Creek. And that begins at I-35, which we today call Plaza de Fundación. So if you ever come down and visit, you can see where the inlet is. And then it ends at Guadalupe Street where the water is dispersed. And so this is a little diagram of that tunnel. Interestingly enough, one of our murals entitled Aqua by Alex Rubio covers the face of one of our tunnel maintenance shafts. So again, with the art trying to serve a dual purpose, we're trying to conceal that, but also highlight the water. And so moving into inundation, just one last quick look at it. I also wanted to mention that the years in the background are years of major floodings, and the cross streets depicted are places where unfortunately there were casualties. And so in 1946, which is you can see on the left bottom side, that was actually a year where Leonel Sosa, which is one of the artists who created this piece, he lost a friend in that year. And so this mural became incredibly personal, not only for Kathy, but him as well. And so that artist duo, I believe, really represented the creek. And so they worked a lot with historians to tell the story and to add their own personal narratives with the San Pedro Creek. It just brings out even more. And so that's why we love to highlight native San Antonio artists along the creek. And so moving forward into restoration, restauración, we really want people to look at themselves and see themselves in this mural. How are we gonna become better? Like, what are we doing to promote the creek, or what are we doing to promote sustainability, not only in San Antonio, but also like worldwide. And so I'm happy to have a large audience that is made up of different members throughout Texas. And so this really is a pensative mural. It really wants you to react and say, how do I want to move forward? And so the mission for the San Pedro Creek Culture Park is to create a world-class linear park that represents cultural, I'm sorry, cultural identity of our community and inspires the people of Bexar County. And so this is done through connection through culture, art, and nature. And so these are currently the phases of the San Pedro Creek. Phase 1 is completed, which runs from Santa Rosa Street all the way to Cesar Chavez. And in May of 2024, we will be opening up phases 2, 3, and 4.1. There should be a large grand opening party, crossing my fingers. And so that's another event that if you happen to find yourself in San Antonio during that time, I highly encourage you to attend. And so these are some of our former grand openings event. This is from phase 1.1, which opened in May of 2018. And this section of the park, as we can see, this is what I was mentioning before, Plaza de Fundación. This is where the creek starts and then trickles down. And so another thing that I love showing people is the before and after photos of the San Pedro Creek. So I'm getting ready to show y'all the oohs and ahs moments, right? So this is now stream. This is where TPR is. This is in between Commerce and Houston streets. Are y'all ready? Oh my God. So it has been retrofitted with a waterfall that lights up, and that waterfall actually has a microphone near the base in this guitar-shaped island, and you can speak into it and the lights will react to your voice. And whenever someone isn't speaking into the microphone, it'll be playing whatever is on TPR at the moment. And so Texas Public Radio, they've been very generous and courteous in working with us as we've developed this section of the creek. And so it's been really awesome trying to create a piece of art that represents our relationship. Here's another piece. This is the 5-panel mural looking south from Commerce Street. So as you can see before, there really wasn't any water. It wasn't supposed to have water unless it was flooding. And so moving into now it being the culture park, we really wanted to reinstate some water. And so to cool down the area, I know that this section still kind of looks pretty bare on the right side, but that is a historic wall, and that is the historic Continental Hotel to the right. And so that is also in the plans of being redeveloped. And so part of that economic goal of the San Pedro Creek, we are seeing return. And so moving forward, there are several developments in place. This is another video or another photo from Dolorosa looking southward. And this is UTSA now. So this is UTSA's School of Cybersecurity. And so really the only thing that you can tell from the previous picture is the red building in the background, barely, with all the overgrowth and the fencing. And so now it's been widened and deepened, and there's also been curves added into the creek. And so that really helps slow down the water, which is what we want in this case. Oh, this one's one of my favorites. Okay. So we see the tower in the back and the buildings to the left, and the channel again was overgrown. It really didn't have any water. And now it's turned into this beautiful, again, seeing the economic development that the San Pedro Creek has played a role in with some of the construction in the back. But it's been really exciting for me, especially to watch this project. It's something that I've followed since I was really small. I know that's weird. Why is a kid looking at like urban development? Like, I don't know. It's something that I've always been interested in. So I'm really happy and excited to be working with the River Authority now. And so again, just wanting to reflect, and hopefully you can see yourself in this piece of restoration. And so going back again, so these are the first goal of the San Pedro Creek is flood control. So more than anything, flood control, it is a flood control project. We want to make that very clear. Yes, before all of the art and everything, it is a flood control project. And so this is the San Pedro Creek while it was flooding. So it's doing its job very well. And then also reducing the floodplain. So the creek channel has been widened and deepened in order to accommodate more floodwaters. And this is all because, you know, the impermeable surfaces that we have, such as parking lots and roads, those really contribute to having water runoff come into the creek and not soak into the ground as it should be. So this goes into our before and after. So as you can see before, you can see where it was widened and deepened and where it was reduced, especially from Chavez to Camp Street in that third slide. And then water quality. So again, trying to reintroduce some of the native vegetation because the San Pedro Creek was a concrete lined water channel. So these waterfalls that we have, such as stream and then on our gates, they help reintroduce oxygen back into the creek. So that helps promote a healthy ecosystem. And then we also have bioswales that line in between the street and the creek. So these help filter water before it enters the creek. It also provides a chance to reintroduce native vegetation, which then becomes habitat for things like pollinators and small birds. And then we also have aquatic plants, which help filter and remove excess oxygen. And in addition to doing that work in removing excess oxygen, it also is a great habitat for young schools of fish. So you'll often see birds camping out in the aquatic plants, and some of them will wiggle their toes and they'll act as worms. And so the fish will bite on, and then the birds will get their snacks. And so looking at the population of birds is actually a really great indicator that we see or that we monitor quite extensively. So that way we know how well the health of the creek is, because if there's a lot of birds, then everything to sustain that population is in place as well. And so again, recreating that natural habitat. And a lot of the wildlife has come on by itself. We have not reintroduced or stocked the creek in any way. And so it's really incredible to see what was once a desolate drainage tunnel that was completely forgotten about. You know, a lot of people, you'll say, hey, the San Pedro Creek, and they'll be like, I didn't know that that existed. But in our act of turning it into a culvert, we really pushed it away and hid it. And so now with it being the culture park, it has been reimagined, and the importance and the history that is on it is now highlighted and featured. And so again, that's just another way that this beautiful linear park is such an incredible and spectacular sight to see. And then again, moreover, we have our cultural linkages, which is not only physical, but also kind of emotional with the several works of art that we have. We're displaying how people have used the creek. So not only the indigenous people, but over time, how we've used it as, an industrial waterway, as breweries, as different types of things. And so a lot of our artworks do serve dual purposes. With the tile work, and specifically stream, which again was the light up waterfall that we saw earlier. And that is a way that the oxygen is being reintroduced and kind of mimicking what the natural processes would have been. And then in the top center, we also have a piece by Joe Lopez, which is entitled Bellos Recuerdos, which is beautiful memories of the Alameda Theater. And so again, the Alameda Theater was on the western side of downtown. It was one of the first Spanish-speaking theaters that was available to the general public in San Antonio. And so it had an incredible impact on San Antonio and the growth of the Hispanic community. And so reflecting that in our murals and just making people or helping people to understand the significance of the waterway is really important to us. And we've tried to display that through art, but also the creek itself is connected to the wider West Side Creek system. So in the future, that is a current project that is active, but in the future, it will be connected to Alazan, Apache, and Martinez Creeks, and they will all be designed not necessarily to the same extent as San Pedro Creek, but definitely with enhancements. And some of those enhancements are already in place. So if you come down to San Antonio and you are done with the Riverwalk, maybe you visited it several times, you can come down to the San Pedro Creek and get a different experience and maybe go into the west side creeks as well. And so some of our events that we have are our every Monday yoga on the creek, as well as our quarterly drum circles, which we've seen a great progression of attendance. And so that's something that may become more frequent. But also the opening of phases 2, 3, and 4.1 in 2024. Crossing my fingers that happens and I'm being accurate at the moment. But also for any other questions that you have, or maybe you want to get more detail on something, I highly encourage you to visit our website at San Pedro Creek Culture or at spcculturepark.com, as it is displayed on the image or on the screen. And then on the bottom right, that is from our one of our drum circles about a year ago. And so you can see kind of the fun that we have there. In addition, if you are from San Antonio and you're tuning in from the inner west side, or maybe you just want to join, we do have a community involvement session this upcoming Saturday, July 22nd, from 9 a.m. to noon at the Foya Middle School. If you can't make it, we do have an online survey that you can fill out. If you're from the San Antonio area, I highly encourage you to participate in this event. And then lastly, how can I help? So we're moving into the, San Antonio River Authority missions and stuff. So how can I help? Well, there's some things that you can do. One of the biggest issues that we have with the river is bacteria buildup, particularly E. coli. And so that comes from bird feces, from human feces, from dog feces. And so though we don't want to single any one animal out, dog feces is something that we can control. And so we highly encourage you to pick up your dog's waste. And so that's something you can do not only in San Antonio, but wherever you're watching from, in whatever watershed you are in. Another way that you can do is try to create some natural habitat by introducing some native plantings, and also something as simple as turning your downspout from your concrete driveway onto your yard is something that can help tremendously in slowing the process of water moving, so that way the water doesn't gain so much velocity and momentum. And then also in a similar fashion, we also have like rain gardens, or maybe some cisterns or rain barrels. And also, don't let litter trash your rivers. So whatever river you're on, whether it's the San Antonio or the Brazos or the Guadalupe, we really highly encourage you to keep the land clean. Clean land equals clean water. And so creating a clean environment is something that we should all be trying to do our best. But also, if you live in the San Antonio area, or maybe you're visiting for a day and you want to be active in cleaning the San Antonio River, we do have our River Warrior volunteer program. And so they do a lot of different things, including apple snail removal. So they are trained in removing invasive species. And so apple snails are an invasive species that we see here, particularly in the museum and downtown sections of the San Antonio Riverwalk. And so they kind of look like bubblegum on the concrete walls. They love that kind of urban concrete environment in the water. And so that's really where they're prolific. But unfortunately, they do eat a lot of the vegetation, which reduces habitat for other native species. And so this is something we try our best to control. And then lastly, I highly encourage you to visit our blog and sign up for our newsletters as well. You can also do the floodplain model. So if you live in the San Antonio River Basin, you can put in your address and see, hey, maybe I'm in a flood zone or not. And follow us on social media. We do have several content platforms, and we're always trying to keep active with events, as well as any sort of breaking news that happens with our rivers and stuff. But also on our San Pedro Creek YouTube channel, we do have several videos as well, going more into depth with personal interviews with the artists. And so if you're very interested in the public art aspect of the San Pedro Creek, that's something else that you can check out. But also the construction side, we do have our Get Creative and our Creekside Chats, which you can watch at your leisure. And that concludes my presentation. Again, I am Julian Navarrete. I am the part-time public affairs coordinator with the San Antonio River Authority. And I want to thank you, Kristen, for inviting me to do this webinar. I mean, it's been a really long time coming, so I'm excited it finally happened.
Of course, and thank you so much. I want to remind everyone, please type your questions into the chat feature or the Q&A, and so we can get to those. But I would really like to speak to the wildlife that has returned, especially behind Casa Navarro. We were really excited when we first saw an Egyptian an Egyptian goose. He was on the roof of one of the buildings. And we were just so shocked to see something other than, you know, the normal like squirrels and like downtown birds that we're used to. But we've seen lots of turtles in the creek. We've seen the Egyptian geese as well, and some herrings. I think they're herrings. I'm not really good, but I'm pretty sure it's a herring. And I was just so shocked to see that we would have that much wildlife find that body of water so quickly. I mean, it was within a couple months. We started to even see them on site, that they were coming over from the creek to the site because we're right behind it. So it's really exciting to see how all of that's working together, and it's restoring, you know, this green space so quickly. I had no idea that could happen within a matter of months. I thought this would take such a long time for us to see any kind of improvements besides what was, you know, physically done by humans, because right behind us, it was, you know, a drainage ditch basically is what the creek was previously. So, and it's also added a safe way for people to travel around downtown. For if you're right at Casa Navarro, you walk less than a block and you're at the creek, which you can enter, and that can take you all the way down to, you know, the Spanish Governor's Palace or Texas Public Radio. And it's a safer way, especially for the school groups that we have come. We always encourage that they travel along the creek because there's lots of construction that's happening on the road level, but also all of the text panels that you all have placed along the creek, speaking to a lot of the history that you covered today in this webinar. So it's really, really cool to see that that's just something else that we can talk to our visitors about and encourage other people to come and visit, because like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people just don't know that the creek existed or know about all of the new things that are happening and everything that's available to people. And especially if you're a native of San Antonio, like you and I are, people stay away from downtown because it's, you know, it's been seen as a touristy thing for so many years. And I'm so happy to see that, you know, places like the River Authority and the city in general have wanted to make this a place for San Antonio natives to
Yeah,
also come
and
back
so
to as well.
the section that Kristen is referring to is just opened recently in October of 2022, and something that Antonio, which is another person from Casa Navarro, mentioned to me that I thought was incredibly interesting was that the well on Casa Navarro's site actually began to start seeing water again once the
Yes.
creek was completed, and so I thought that that was pretty awesome. But again, just going over the San Pedro Creek or the San Antonio River Authority does have our 3 goals of safe, clean, and enjoyable creeks and rivers. And so by going out there and showing your support by visiting the creek, you are really helping us attain our enjoyable goal. And so it's really awesome to see when all of the parts fall into place.
We do have a few questions. One comment to start with: this talk would be awesome to have as an audio tour. Visitors could tune in while they're walking along the creek. And if memory serves me, I think you're working on something like this, right?
Yes, ma'am. We actually are. So at the moment, we do have an audio guided tour, which is actually only from phase 1.1, which is the section that opened back in 2018. But at the moment, as I was saying, we did just open up this new section, which is phase 1.2 and 1.3 in October of 2022. And so hopefully shortly we will be releasing our new version of our San Pedro Creek Culture Park app, which you can take a guided tour on. If not, again, visit spcculturepark.com, and there's audio tours on there as well.
We have another question. How many ADA ramps / elevators will be created for the existing and new areas Well, this says Riverwalk, but I'm thinking maybe they're talking about San Pedro Creek.
So on the San Pedro Creek, that is a really good question. At the moment, everything is ADA accessible. I'm trying to think of how many ramps there are. I can't really think of that on the top of my head, but I can assure you that everything is ADA accessible. And something that we get quite often, a question is like, where are the rails? Where, like, how are people supposed to like get around or not fall into the creek? And to that, again, being a flood control project first and foremost, that is our main concern. Although we do care about the safety of people, unfortunately, bars and rails do become catchment for debris in a flood event. And so if that water gets trapped, then the rails themselves can either catch debris or become debris themselves. And so we don't want that to happen. So we do have special permissions not to have rails, but I can fully assure you again that everything on the San Pedro Creek is fully ADA accessible.
And I do know that there is one ramp located right by Casa Navarro on Dolorosa Street. So if you're at Dolorosa, right by where the new UTSA building is, you can enter the creek there on that ramp, but I'm unsure of where others are. But that's some information we need to learn.
There's
Clearly.
2 ramps on Houston Street. There's a ramp on Commerce Street. There's a ramp on Dolorosa. And there's a ramp at Santa Rosa Street.
And we have so many compliments about your incredible presentation, Julian. We have at least 4 or 5 people who have commented just that it's been a great presentation and they enjoy your infectious enthusiasm, as one of them stated. So I really, really appreciate it. I can't thank you enough. And thank you, everyone. I mean, if you have anything else to add, Julian?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm so happy that I was able to create this presentation. The San Pedro Creek is something that means the world to me, and so I'm happy to share my enthusiasm with everyone.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to thank every one of our viewers who stuck with us for this hour, and thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. And if you're interested in any other webinars that Casa Navarro or the Texas Historical Commission puts on, you can sign up for the newsletter or follow us on social media. But thank you so much, Julian, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, ma'am. You too.
Bye.
Thank you.